I am Alex Abbott. I'm your host for SalesTV Americas today, and I'm greatly honoured to introduce Roderick Jefferson to you today. Roderick and I go back many years working together at Oracle, and having recently read his book. I must admit, Roderick, it was sitting on my shelf for quite some time, but now I have read your book. I love the way you talk about an organization having a joined up message that is used by the entire organization, not just the sales team. And having worked for an organization that I think gets that right, I've experienced the success that you can have by an organization embracing that effectively. But not every organization can. And so really pleased to hear your view about that today, and also talk about some of the more practical topics like, why conversations are more effective than pitching, and how important it is that we have the human side of leadership. So with that, why don't you tell us a few words about yourself, and we'll go from there.
First of all, guys, thanks for having me on. Alex, it's great to be able to reconnect anytime we can get back together. It is always an honor of mine. So Roderick Jefferson, I am first and foremost a sales guy. Started out as a BDR, went into sales AE, did well there, made it to President's Club, and then got promoted to AE and actually turned it down. Yep, I know. My sales leader had that very same look on his face. But what I did was I realized that I love the process of selling rather than taking down those big deals. So what I said was, what if I could give you two problems that you would absolutely love to have? One, what if I could help accelerate folks to ramp faster than we were doing today, using some of the basic rudimentary templates that I had? And second, what if I would have you go back and ask for and need more budget for folks going to President's Club because so many people were going? And the answer was, then you've got a new job. That new job turned into sales training. And I've been doing sales training in about a little less than 20 years ago, created this nomenclature that we call sales enablement. And, to watch my baby grow and morph into what it has become today is beyond my wildest imagination. And so today I'm the CEO of Roderick Jefferson & Associates. We are a enablement consulting on a fractional basis, right? Helping companies accelerate speed to revenue, getting them up and running, building out enablement programs, and then taking it to that next level of, and I want to definitely stress, taking it from just being sales enablement to your point, Alex, of now moving to the entire full-blown version of revenue enablement, and encompassing all of the other partners into this piece so that it's now a well-oiled orchestra.
Nice. So when you talk about this kind of notion of having conversations instead of pitching, I'm sure everybody's got their own view of what that is, but certainly myself as a salesperson and sales leader in the past, I felt that there's been so much more value generated in the conversation when you actually have a conversation and stop pitching.
Oh, I agree 100%. First and foremost, no one likes to be sold to. I don't care what it is you're buying. You want someone that's going to help me, or in today's world where there's so much access to content, you want someone that's going to give you context. And what I mean is help me to either make the right decision or confirm the decision that I've made already. For the longest, back in the days of just training, we taught people what I call bits, bytes, and bots, right? Which were just products and features. We all know that no longer works because, one, you have a far more savvy buyer, and secondly, they will tell you outright what it is that they need if you ask the right questions. And I think that's where the delineation is, right? To me, pitching is about pushing information out, and having those conversations are about pulling in more information. And I think there's kind of four components to it. First is the focus and energy on things that show interest and show that you're deeply prepared, right? This will help you to kind of tailor your pitch to the specific needs and identify potential opportunities, which then leads to building rapport. Look, we're virtual now for the most part, and we all know it takes a completely different level of actual caring and focus to build that rapport. Because look, relationships have been the backbone of success for as long as there's been sales. But I believe there's never been a time where leading with humanity, empathy, and EQ has meant more than it does today, right? Which means now taking active listening to a whole different level of discovery and qualifications, of asking questions, not just about the company and confirming, oh, I've done my homework. I looked at your 10Q. I listened to your last earnings report, but it's also another component, and that is the human piece of this. And that is, we rarely teach sellers how to actually ask the most important question that I think that will change the entire direction of a prospect's mind. And that is, so Mr. and Mrs. Customer, what will it do for you personally by having a relationship with our company that you can't get with anyone else? Will it help you get out of the doghouse? Will it get you a bigger seat at the table? Will it get you a promotion? Will it move you forward and propel in your career? Which then leads to the third, and that's clear communication. Look, there's nothing better that demonstrates that you're credible, knowledge, and competent than being able to clearly and concisely articulate something, right? But it can also motivate your prospect to take action, like, scheduling, moving things forward, and then ultimately buying and making a purchase. And the last piece is, again, something that gets left out all too often, and that is continued nurturing. The same amount that you showed in respect and I'll say love, if you will, to your prospect, you have to show it also when they become your customer. And that means showing genuine interest in the person, not just the logo, not just the closed sale or being able to ring the bell, but continuing that nurturing relationship so that you can ensure a long-term success by providing ongoing support, resources, and also a relationship with them. Does that make sense?
It does. And there's a really good point there, I think, from Bob Britton, if you want to bring that up. Thanks, Rob. And Rob, we've touched on this recently about an enablement being seen as a cost as opposed to a revenue, a strategic revenue growth practice.
First, let me read Bob's comment. Bob Britton says, I believe we need to stop conflating sales training and sales enablement. Many, maybe most, CXOs still think enablement is training. That's bad. It relegates enablement to a tactic rather than the strategic function it was intended to be. And then, yes, Alex, to your point, if you see this as a cost center rather than an opportunity to further generate revenue, well, what do we do with costs? We cut them. We cut them until we can't cut anymore. And sometimes that means cutting them completely. Whereas enabling the team to sell more, to sell better, is generating revenue.
Absolutely.
The challenge is measuring that. And that's often very hard for somebody in that sales enablement role to do, to justify their existence.
Rob, I will respectfully disagree on that last piece.
Good.
I think it's
Don't
very
do it respectfully.
I think
Don't
it's
do it
actually
respectfully.
very easy to validate this. And all the other pieces before, I agree with you wholeheartedly. And I think a part of it is because, one, enablement for the longest, and we did this to ourselves, practitioners. So we have no one to blame. We've been seen as the fixers of broken things, right? Or that
Yes.
junk drawer that is supposed to be the answer to all things. You've got a thimble, you've got a calculator, you've got an old sock. That's not what we are, right? And the other reason is because I don't think that we have done a very good job of articulating the value of enablement and also the delineation between us and training, right? Especially L&D. I believe that, first of all, my perspective has always been you train animals and you enable people. Right. And what I mean by that is I'm not teaching sellers how to sit or roll over. This is an ongoing occurrence. It's not a single event. Enablement's a marathon. It's not a sprint, right? And so when you can articulate, first of all, what I call the waterfall steps of what enablement does, then it's very easy to tie that back to hardline revenue focused metrics. All too much, we've been focused on smiley sheets and butts and seats, right? How many people have we trained? What's our scores? What's our amazing feedback? No one cares about that anymore, right? And the value of enablement is that we are the orchestrator that now is the hub that spokes out to every part of the organization. We're not an outlier. We're not sales scribes. We're not sales support. And we're not sales doormat. And so, again, if you step back away from just talking about sales, it's very easy then to have that conversation around metrics. And so, and the key is that we as enablement folks have to be what I call the translators of dialects and languages, right? Being European will make a lot of sense, guys.
Yeah.
You've got British, you've got Spanish, you've got German, you've got French, right? And all of these things will in some way converge. But if you don't speak to them in their language, first of all, and would you agree, they won't ingratiate you, even if you made an attempt to speak their language, right? Then they're like, oh, okay, at least you tried. So now they're going to open up a bit more. I think the same thing happens inside of companies. When I'm talking to sales leaders, what am I talking about? Things like average deal size, deal velocity, pipeline creation, quota attainment, win and loss rates, time to revenue, and I mean first and second close. But if I go talking to an SE leader, they're going to look at me like I've got three heads. So what am I going to talk to them about? Number of demos, number of opties won and lost, number of POCs, length of POC. Now I go and I talk to a customer success or a client services leader. They don't care about those things. They care about adoption rate, customer churn, lifetime value, CSAT, escalation resolution, first call resolution rates, and net promoter scores. And then finally, I change my hat again and go talk to a different language when I'm talking to channels and alliances. I'm talking to them about things like partner attachment rates and customer sat and number of completed proctored accreditation certifications, net retention scores, opti sources. So it comes down to, and it's the most basic of what we've all learned, whether it's in sales, another organization, or an enablement. Know your audience and talk to them in their language. Don't try and teach them enablement ease.
Yeah, it's a incredibly complex area, and combine the cultural differences around the world, and it gets even more complex. But
absolutely,
I want to touch on a point, and I want to bring you in on this, Andy. I want to touch on a point that we've talked before on this on Sales TV about revenue enablement, and how revenue enablement has become the new sales enablement to straddle all teams across the organization, but at the risk of losing sight of enabling or empowering the individual and improve the individual's skills and their ability to perform at the highest standard, because they're having to conform with an organizational kind of revenue objective.
So I loved what Roderick said about, you enable people, you train a dog. I actually put out a LinkedIn post about this about 2 years ago. I want to see the world where we actually enable the salesperson to be the best version that they can possibly be, and acknowledge the fact that they will work for an organization for a defined period of time, which is their choice. Sometimes the organization's choice, but most their choice. And actually then look at two tiers, really, Alex, and I'd be fascinated by Roderick's view on this, which is there's an element of sales enablement, sales operations, which is we can't have anarchy, we have to have a process. But there's then an element of stop this bullshit about actually getting people to do stuff that moves your number and actually do stuff that helps them move themselves, which will consequently move your number. And we seem to have completely missed this. And I think there's two camps of sales enablement people. There's people like Roderick. Jacqueline's just finished the launch, so she's saying hi. Brilliant. Well done. Those of you that don't know, by the way, in the green room when we were riffing, Alex nonchalantly looked out of his window and went, why is Jacqueline, my wife, not finished the lawn yet? So
it wasn't quite like that.
Roderick then asked, why are your children licking the car tires clean? But the point is that I see sales enablement people in two camps. People like Roderick who stepped outside and gone, you know what, I'm going to challenge sales leaders in this place. And there are some people who are still in organizations that do that. They look across the horizon at sales enablement leaders and go to their leaders in sales and go, you know what, this is the thing you should be thinking about. And there are others who the sales leader comes in and goes, we have got some serious crap going on with margins. Henceforth, I'm telling you as an enablement leader, go fix negotiation skills. And I want to see more of the Roderick type, the look across the horizon and let's think about what we need to do for the individuals, as opposed to those in service to sales leaders that don't get it.
I think Jay has a good comment here. I want to bring that into the discussion. Jay Shepard says, ask 15 different CXOs on their definition of sales or revenue enablement. You'll get 10 different answers. And where does best enablement reside? Jay, first, I take issue with what you said. If you're asking 15 different CXOs their definition, you're going to get 20 different definitions. And the other thing that I wanted to add that is in line with this is maybe I was naive, but the first time I heard the term sales enablement, I thought it was enabling of the verb that is to sell, whereas most people perceive it as enabling it of the noun that is the person or persons who make up the sales team. At a big picture, two very different things, because enabling sales, the verb, could take place in the CS department, could take place in HR, could take place in the C-suite. But enabling the noun that is sales can only take place in the sales department. So instead of fixing our definition, we just went with a different word for it. Thanks, Forrester, for telling us now we've got to switch over to revenue enablement instead. But was I just naive? Did I miss it from the onset?
No, you absolutely nailed it, right? I think what it did actually was, in some cases, actually created more silos, right?
Yeah.
And rather than connecting all of those other lines of business. And that's why I am so bullish on revenue enablement. I know the guy that created sales enablement, hey, an old dog can be taught new tricks, right? And I'm here to prove that to prove that point. You say that fast. That's easy for you, right? So that's why on enablement, I think, first of all, Jay makes a valid point. And Jay, my friend, we have had this conversation a number of times. Where should enablement sit? I've sat under the COO. I've sat under the CRO. I've sat under marketing. And to me, it's a very simple explanation. Sales is the sun. The further you get away from the sun, the colder it gets. Right. So what I'm saying is, I believe it should sit under that CRO. Right. If you're talking sales. Now, that's a great conversation. If you've got a COO or someone or president that owns that entire customer lifecycle, or you've got someone that owns go-to-market as a whole, that's where it should sit. Because to me, revenue enablement actually integrates strategies, processes, technologies that ultimately optimize the entire customer lifecycle. And that was the problem I always had with sales enablement as a whole, is we kind of get compartmentalized, not by us, but by leaders that actually don't understand the value of what we do or what we bring. But if you can show that you're that orchestra master that's connecting all the dots and making sure that all of the different instruments are all playing the right time, the right song, in phase and in tune, then ultimately you can turn all of that noise and chaos into a beautiful sheet of music. And I think now, to take that back to a real life perspective of corporate work, that means getting all of those teams moving towards a common goal of ultimately sustainable revenue growth. To me, that's revenue enablement. That's aligning sales, marketing, customer success, client services, ops, finance. And that's another one that gets lost, right? HR, partners, alliances, product marketing, all of those together. If you can get everybody on the same page, that is a game changer, not just for your company, but more importantly for your prospects and for your customers.
Bob brings up a good point. Bob Britton comments, because enablement is a cross-functional element, it needs to report into the C-suite. So it has, so it has the authority to work across the organization. If it reports to anything lower in the org, then it's difficult to affect needed changes.
Bob, you got a valid point there, because below that, what you then become is that scribe that we were talking about earlier, right? If you're and you're working at the C-suite level, what now happens is an opportunity to weave enablement into the culture, the fabric of culture. And that's the only way it's going to work, is if it is pushed from the top down. And if you've got folks that are owning the adoption, the execution, but most importantly, the positive modeling of what's expected by revenue enablement and their value, that changes everything. Now you're not pushing people to do things. You're literally pulling them into things that they need and ultimately that they start to ask for.
And a quick question from the audience. Roderick, can you please say that comparison from the sun and sales again, please?
Sure.
I need to write that down.
Absolutely.
Say it slowly for him, Roderick.
Sales is the sun. And the further you move away from the sun, the colder it gets.
As a sales enablement function, or generally?
As an enablement leader and function, you've got to be close to that sun. Because again, as you move out, they move you under marketing, they move you over under other parts of the organization. You're not ingrained in those key conversations that are going to be game changers. And you also aren't at the table to bring a diversity of thought differently than the other players.
How do you manage if you've got a global mandate as an enablement leader, trying to roll out, a key component of the go-to-market strategy, but you've got sales leaders around the world that know best. How do you...
That never happens, Alex. Come on now. Look, it is what you sign up for when you take on a global remit. And as someone that has owned enablement globally for a number of years now, I think there's a couple things. One, I always believed, and I've even said to this when we were together working back at Oracle, Alex, and that was that you build processes, programs, etc., at an 80-85% clip globally. You leave that 15 to 20% difference for culture, climate, the way business is done. But then what you also do is make sure that they're not going off the rail by staying close to those leaders, right? And how do you do it? Making sure that, one, you're never giving any global region what you think they need. They know better than any of us do because they live and they work in that dirt and that space every day. Stay close to them and bring in their ideas. And when they do those ideas and those work, highlight them. Let them be your megaphone, because what they're going to show is either they're a leader and this is working, or here's what the other regions are not doing. Why aren't you doing them? Right? And look at what it could be if you did these things. And then, of course, on that back end, as we talked about earlier, Metrics, 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 and measurements. When you can come back and say that we've accelerated speed to revenue, we've increased productivity per head, and we've ultimately tied the front and the back of the house together of sales and customer success, who's not going to listen to that? When you can show hard line figures of how it worked, and also that it's not just siloed to that particular region, but that we can do the same thing in your region, or whether it be in the different stratas of sales, enterprise, etc. Right? Go back and show those pieces, but don't be the megaphone enablement leaders. Let your sales leaders go out and sell for you. They can open up doors where you may not even know there's a house there.
An added benefit to that, Roderick, buy-in. You never
Absolutely.
have to get them to buy into their own idea. If you just help them codify what they were doing that worked and do more of it regularly,
100%.
they will do that.
Oh, let's throw in accountability also, since we're going down
Absolutely.
that road, right? Because if I'm working with you as a sales leader and you tell me exactly what you want and I work with you to build it, here's an example. We're building out a certification or an accreditation. I work with the sales leaders. They give me the best practices. They point me to the best folks on their teams that I can use an example. They now cannot step back and say, I'm not going to go and support this or push my people to do it because I'm giving you exactly what you asked for. So now you've been a part of the build. So it's incumbent upon you, sales leader, to own the adoption, the execution, but most importantly, the positive modeling of it. Because as we know, what's important to my manager or leader is imperative to me. I'm going to do what I see them do, not what they tell me to do. Unless I'm way off base and life has changed.
Yeah. So what about from a sales rep perspective? So we're talking a lot about enablement leadership, sales leadership, and some of the best practices. But what, in your experience, what percentage of a sales organization, the salespeople, and when I say salespeople, it can be in new business as well as existing clients. What percentage of reps are not coming on the journey typically, and what do you do for them to help them come on the journey?
Well, I rather than giving a generic number, I'll say it depends upon the vertical and space you're working in. There's a higher uptake in some than in others, at least from my personal experience. How do I get them on board? First of all, it's that, let's go back to that human touch. I think enablement should be a part of the talent assessment and acquisition phase of hiring people, because the companies are generally focused on their ICP, right? Their ideal client profile. In enablement, we're focused on that, but we're also focused on the IEP because we don't have enough acronyms, right? The ideal employee profile. And that means that things are changing based upon the maturation cycle of a company. And so we have to adjust that. Secondly, we're now working with them in the interview process to understand whether or not they have the propensity to follow through and actually fulfill on the thing that it takes for them to be successful here, not where they were successful before, which is great, but means nothing in the future forward move with them. And finally, because we deal with sales on a daily basis, our BS meter and filter is way higher, I believe, than any other part of the organization. Yeah. So then it's about making sure that there's role specific onboarding for them, and you give them a roadmap. It's amazing how many times I've seen where people are onboarding and have no idea where they're going. Right now, here's what your onboarding is going to look like, role specific, as well as the co-join cohorts that you're building. And that's the other thing. You've got to build those cohorts differently now than we used to ever do, because now it's got to lead to the everboarding piece. Too many times I've seen where, onboarding is amazing, but now I've been here 6 months. I've seen nothing from anybody, right? No one's asked me any questions other than the occasional survey and such, right? But then the everboarding is important. The asset management, ask them what works and what format of content works for them, because everyone learns differently. And then give the asset availability. Don't send them to 3-4 different places. They're not going to go. They're going to go to each other and say, hey, that thing that you built, give me that. And what does it do? It dilutes the messaging and the positioning. And ultimately, it starts to confuse the prospect and folks out in the streets. Then there's the coaching and reinforcement. We've got to constantly sharpen that sword to make sure that as there are changes, whether it be competitive landscape, mergers and acquisitions, new product releases, it's constantly coaching and also putting it into practical application. It's one thing to learn something. It's another thing to be able to actually go out and do it here in-house with certifications and accreditations, role plays, all those things, right? And then it's the metrics and measurements. And here's an opportunity for enablement to highlight even the newbies that are doing things amazingly well. When they come in with best practices, highlight these people, put their name up in lights, share it out there, because it's going to do two things. One, it's going to ingratiate you into the sales organization. That person now is going to be on your team from here on out. And it's also going to push your seasoned folks, because now they're being shown up by the newbies. So what does it do? It raises the bar. Look, salespeople are naturally competitive. We'd be stupid not to play on that competitiveness. And then finally, show them that we've got some form of career or succession planning in place. You may not want to be a sales leader like I did, right? So what if you want to go into product marketing or product management or go into enablement? You've got to have a flexible succession plan process and strategy in place so that they feel like they have some vote and some voice in driving their own career. Does that help, guys?
Absolutely.
I think so.
That roadmap, by the way, that succession plan, when presented during the interview process, that is a distinct differentiator.
100%.
Most companies do not do that. We hired beyond our capabilities because we were willing to just share with them, this is our vision for you. And it's not some major corporate secret that oh, if our competitors knew of this, we'd be sunk. Yet, for some reason, we hide it. Why do you think that is?
I think there's a couple reasons. One, whether or not that succession plan is in place and fully supported. And the other is, I don't think that most companies really understand how much of a differentiator enablement really is in the onboarding and the retention of folks, right? And so to your point, Rob, if we said right up front, here's what our career or succession plan strategy looks like, you know what it says to me if I'm the prospect or the candidate? I say, you guys are actually investing in me, and they've already thought about this ahead of time, and we're not bringing you on to be successful here. We literally want to bring you on to build a long-term relationship. And that means in a relationship, it's both give and take, right? Not just us kind of shoehorning into what's going to drive revenue for us. Look, let's not get it wrong. Corporate America is here to make a profit, not friends in most cases. But at the same time, there's an opportunity to show that you as an individual are not just valuable, you're also valued.
So marketing, this is a great point by Sean.
You want to read it for us?
Yeah, well, I do. Let me come to it in a sec. I just want to kind of tee this up, because the biggest problem that personally I'm experiencing speaking with sales leaders today is it's either the lack of pipeline or the lack of quality pipeline, because they're having to relax qualification in order to get to work on something. And it feels traditionally sales enablement as a function hasn't been supporting marketing to generate pipeline or salespeople to generate pipeline. And it feels like we're kind of stuck between sales expecting marketing to generate the pipeline. But in reality, we really need those experienced salespeople to take charge and accountability of, developing their own pipeline, because they're the experts. Where do you, and we'll come to Sean's point in a minute, where do you sit in terms of that point?
I think it's not an or, I think it's and. First of all, no true seller is going to be dependent on someone else bringing everything to the table for them to eat, right? We're natural hunters, so that means we're gatherers. We're going to bring things, but at the same time, no one's going to push back if you've got a marketing team that actually is integrated into the entire sales process. Buyer's journey. Let me step back from all of that crazy into the buyer's journey. And if you go back to the very beginning, it starts with what? Seeding, right? And I look at it as kind of a plant. And this is why I think you've got to look at that front end of how are we first and where are we planting the seed? And what I mean in real life is, and I've asked marketing folks, marketing leaders, have you ever got a definition of what an MQL versus an SQL is from your sales leader? Because what have we heard? Marketing says we give you all these leads and sales doesn't do anything with them. And sales says, yeah, because they all suck, so we don't do anything with them. Well, part of it is bringing them to the table and saying, here's the definition of, and also looking at marketing as a part of that entire buyer's journey versus this front end piece that they do all their pieces. They go out to conventions, they're sending out marketing assets and collateral. No, it's more than that. They're actually the front end of building that relationship. So again, if we looked at this as a relationship versus just sales stages, sales methodology, sales process, and selling motions, it's very easy to ingratiate them, but it requires a conversation on what does success look like before you go out and just assume they're going to come and throw things at you. The second part of it is you got to go out and hunt, right? You got to go out. And when you do that, it's easier for you to go back and tell them and show them what it looks like and what you're looking for versus assuming, and we all know what happens when we assume, right? Rather than assuming that they already know. Most of the time they don't because they haven't carried a bag. They work closely with you. And then the last part here is where enablement can come in and literally go back to that translator of dialects and languages where you can talk to marketing and say, hey, this is sales speak. What the way you've got it together, you've got the right components, but it's not the way that salespeople think. Then you go back to salespeople and say, if you could get this from marketing, what would it look like? And then you mesh those together, bring them to the same table, and guess what you have? I think a higher level of success is what you have.
Yeah, and I think Sean's point, Sean Lewin, be true, be honest, be focused, be flexible.
People buy people. I worked in the corporate world for 27 years and knew within minutes when someone was suitable for sales. Be true, be honest, be focused, be flexible. How often are visions not actually implemented in reality? And then a couple of other comments have come through. Bob Britton says, be careful with best practices. They're basically the emulation of what a rainmaker does, not why they do what they do. And because top sellers are typically unconscious competence, they have a hard time explaining the why. And he follows up with,
I love that point there.
Love that point,
Rob, about best practices. I even hate the expression best practice because the concept of that is that you are going to copy what somebody else did. And the bad news about that is that we are living in an environment where actually the advantage, the competitive advantage, comes from being first to market with your thinking, to break the mold and do something innovative. And by very virtue of the fact that there is an established best practice means that you're not being innovative. You're simply being second to market.
Yeah, I'm not sure I agree with that.
I knew you wouldn't.
There you go.
And actually, on the subject of bringing sales and marketing together, I've part-written a book on this, so believe me, I know what I'm talking about.
And called it Smarketing. Great idea. Yeah. No, I think there are acceptable ways of calling things best practice. So things like customer intimacy and great stakeholder mapping and things like that are some of the great hygiene factors that some people need help with and some people are naturally brilliant at. So I think the bit about what you're trying to say is very valid, but I think there are very justifiable best practice elements that anybody can follow.
Yeah, there are good examples, but I think the idea that I'm going to simply emulate your way of doing it is very dangerous. And Roderick, you made the comment of about the seller journey, and then you went, no, actually, scrub that, the buyer journey. And again, another one of my pet hates is this whole kind of buyer journey mapping. We all worked at Oracle. We used to do, but it's got nothing to do with the buyer's journey. It's got everything to do with the seller's journey. It's like, what have I got to give you at the point when I can change your opinion about what you're going to do? And you know, so many sales organizations bandy around expressions like, we're going to have a relationship, you know, a relationship based sale. And actually, it's not about relationship, it's about commercial relationship. That's what people are after. And that's why this whole qualifying out thing is, again, a bit of a misnomer, isn't it? You know, with long buying cycles, I'm on a quarter to quarter thing. It's like, okay, I have to qualify you in or out. I should be qualifying you now or later.
Adam, I disagree vehemently.
Excellent.
Vehemently on this one. I'm ultra passionate about this. It's not about the seller's stages and journey, processes, programs. Absolutely not. Because then
it shouldn't be. Absolutely right. That's my point. My point is that it should be about the buyer journey, but it very rarely is. Most companies.
Okay, my apologies.
Yeah. No, because
otherwise we shoehorn them in, right, into the way we want them to move, versus learning from them how they buy and why.
And it comes under the banner of customer journey mapping, but it's never about the customer journey. It's always about, what can I do to boost my sales?
Oh,
and
you're so cynical.
But the reality is that the organizations that understand the customer behaviors, those are the organizations that thrive. And so few do these days. Almost every company, it's all about their sale. It's never about the customer. It's never really about we talk about customer centricity, but it's an expression which is used rather than a feeling that organizations have.
But the best salespeople will care about the customer and the buyer, and therefore be successful.
But I can't help feeling that that's situated within the individual and rarely within the organization. And therein lies the problem. The super talented sellers get this inherently. And who was it that said about unconscious competencies? You know,
Bob.
Yeah, the great sellers are great sellers, and often they don't know why they're great sellers. But what they do know is that customers or prospects feel comfortable with them, and that's absolutely because they're customer centric and they understand the customer's buying journey. And putting the customer at the middle is what makes them great, and often they don't know why. I think.
It's been a great conversation. I know Rob's got some things to share that he wants to show before we hit, and on the bombshell that after 6-7 weeks, somebody's actually apologized to you live on air, Adam. I'm gonna have to go and have a lie down.
In fairness, that was a misunderstanding. It's because I didn't explain myself properly. So
it's the accent.
It doesn't count as an apology. So we're still at zero, mate. Don't worry.
So, Roderick, I just wanted to bring on screen a copy of your book, and if you could tell us a little bit about it and how people can connect with you, that would be great.
Sure. Adam, it's all about best practices. No, I'm kidding.
Boom, that mic drop moment. Thank you. Thank you.
No, it's literally Sales Enablement 3.0 was my journey from the very beginning of the inception of sales enablement, and of Sales Enablement 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, and 3.0 is literally about where I believe it's going. Where are we going to get to next? How are we going to get to the next new, not the new, but the next version of enablement, whether it be go-to-market enablement, whether it be revenue enablement, sales enablement, whatever you're going to call it and where you're going to take it. What I do is literally give my perspective of 25 years of how we got here and where we're going to. And it's not just for enablement folks. It's literally about how do you orchestrate along the lines of business to make sure that everyone is collaborative and communicative, and then ultimately orchestrative. Now, to find it, it's out everywhere you buy it. It's in paperback, it's in audiobook, hard book, etc. eBay. You can find it on Amazon or wherever you buy your books.
Are you doing the?
I
actually did do the audio.
Wow. Okay. Well, that's worth having.
Thanks, man.
So we get this wonderful smooth voice, and I know because I bought the audio book.
Where's this conversation going? This is borderlining on a bit of dodginess. It's like wonderful voice.
I aim
You
to
listen to
please.
it every night before you go to bed.
Alex, take us home, please.
It's because I drone
Please
on and
get-
it probably put him to sleep every night. Is what he's trying to say.
Yeah.
Jeffrey's upset because
My wife.
the other man.
And
I'm
on
not
that,
touching that one. HR.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Roderick, it's been lovely having you on. Thank you very much. Thank you to the panelists. Thank you to everyone that has made comments. I think too many to list everyone, but Sean, Bob, Jensen, Jackie, and Jay, and some LinkedIn users. Feel free to drop your name in. And someone from Australia. Good day from Darwin, Australia, which was that must be very early for them. I wish you every success, Roderick, with the sales of your book and your new engagements, and look forward to seeing everyone again next week for Sales TV.
Thanks all.
Thanks, Roderick.
Thanks, Roderick.